it's Diana from My Humble Kitchen. I'm so excited to finally share with you guys my super simple everyday bread recipe. Now, this bread I learned from my friend Sadagat. She's from Azerbaijan, so it's a really typical European loaf. It tastes phenomenal with dinner, hunked off. It's just a nice crusty bread. It's great to save the ends to stale, to purposefully, intentionally stale, and use in soups or as croutons and salads. And you know, it also makes phenomenal toast and sandwiches. So really, it's just typical everyday super simple bread. Now, what I love so much about it is that it only takes 4 to 5 ingredients. It literally takes me about 5 minutes to mix everything up and to get it on its first rise. And so it's really just a super easy recipe that anyone can do regardless of how experienced you are with bread. This is just the perfect bread that I know you're going to love. So anyways, we'll get back to it and I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is add 2.5 cups of unbleached, unenriched flour. This is white flour. Now you could use freshly milled whole wheat flour, but I would add about an extra 4 tablespoons of flour if you're going to do that, just because it's lighter. Okay, so there's 2.5 cups. To that, we're going to add 2 teaspoons of salt and 2.5 teaspoons of yeast and 1¼ cups of warm water. Now, one of the important things about making bread is to always remember to add less flour at the beginning, because you can always add more flour if it's too moist. But if you add too much flour and less water, then you're going to end up with a dry dough, and a dry dough, all that ends up being is a dense loaf. Okay? So, and what's really important for this type of bread is to have a moist. We're going to want that stickiness. You're going to think that maybe it's too sticky, but that's what's going to create a really light and airy loaf. Okay, and the amount of time that we're going to be doing it in. So I've just mixed it. All I did is just mix that up. And that's mixed to a shaggy dough. And all a shaggy dough is just mixing up all of the ingredients together. And you're going to see that's just a shag, okay? So from here, all you need to do is just start to knead it with your hands. And you're going to see right away that this is going to start to feel sticky. Okay? And with as sticky as that is, you can see that it's sticky. So I can now add a little bit more flour. And I'm just going to sprinkle it with some flour. Not very much. You'll be surprised at how quick the bread absorbs it, okay? But that just gives it enough to allow us to knead it a little bit more. And see, this is the reason why we add less flour, because we can add that extra bit of extra flour. Okay, but it's still wet, and see, this is okay. This is what we want. We want this wet dough, okay? This is feeling nice. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more flour. About that much. Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and keep kneading it. And what I'm going to do is I'm really just grabbing it and throwing it against the side of the bowl. Trying to pick up all of those loose ends, cleaning the bowls on the rims. Okay, but here it is, and you're going to see it's a little bit thicker, but it's still very much wet. See, it's very much still stuck to my hands. But let's just see that. See that? It's still nice and wet. And that just feels nice. Okay, I'm just going to add a tiny bit more flour. And I'm going to knead that in. And really, this is feeling pretty nice. Okay? See that? It's definitely still sticking to my hands, but it feels nice. Now that's what I want. Yeah, that feels really good. And you know, the more that you start to make bread, the more that you're going to be able to tell yourself when a loaf feels nice and the dough feels nice and soft and supple, and it's just something that comes with practice and comes with time, okay? So anyways, what I'm going to do from here is just take off as much as I can from my hands, but I'm going to go ahead and oil a new bowl. And the reason is because when it rises, I don't want it to stick to the sides of the pan. So with extra virgin olive oil, I'm just going to drop in a bit and oil up the sides of that pan so that when that rises, it's not going to stick. And that's what I want, is to have just a nice environment where it won't stick. With that extra oil, I'm going to go ahead and bring this back. I'm going to drop some up on the dough. I'm just going to actually just get a little bit of olive oil and do that to it. Okay? With that olive oil, it's just going to allow me to pick it up and to shape it a little bit. See that? So here's what I have. See how I'm just shaping it a little bit? My hands are nice, and when you have that oil on your hands, they don't stick, so that's what we want. So I'm grabbing it, folding it over, grabbing it, and just kind of turning clockwise. See how nice that looks? It's just really a nice, just simple loaf. And now what I'm going to do is just drop it right in. I'm going to flip it around just a time. So now the whole thing's filled with oil. And I'm going to go ahead, cover it with plastic wrap, cover it with a towel, and then let that rise for an hour. And once that rises, I will come back so you can see what it looks like. The bread has now sat for an hour, about an hour and 10 minutes, I guess, give or take. But as you can tell, it has risen. If you press into it, oops, it's so sticky. But you know, it should stay down when you press into it. I might put some flour on my fingers, okay? So what I'm going to do is now get this out of the bowl. But the trick about this is this has already created a bunch of different gases, and it's already light and airy, so we don't want to just smush all of that work that's gone into it for the past hour. So what I'm going to do is just sprinkle it with some flour, and that's just to allow it to not stick to my hands. I'm going to rub flour on my own hands, and gently I'm going to press down and around on the bottom of the bowl, okay, around the sides of it. And I'm just trying to get it out without compressing this whole thing completely down. So there we go. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put it on the floor, not the floor, the table. And from here, what I want to do is just start to shape it. I'm just going to press it down and around. And what I'm doing is I'm just tucking and turning. So it's tucking and turning, tucking and turning, tucking and turning. And this is not a great surface. I'm in my dining room to be able to do this, but you know, on a nice counter is where you want to do this. Now you're going to notice that it is going to want to start sticking again. So just go ahead and just put some more of that flour. And the reason we're doing this is we are, without completely pressing it down, we are forming this loaf and making it tight in order that it rises up instead of flat. So the more that we can get it tighter around, the more that it's going to rise up versus flattening out. Okay, and that's not, we don't want it to flatten out. We want it to be nice and round, a nice bowl. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Now that's pretty good. I would say that's pretty much done. It's nice and firm. Okay, so from here what I'm going to do is I have a nice sharpened knife. What would work even better is a razor blade, but I don't have one, so I need to get one. But what I do is I just sharpen this up really nicely, and I then cut it right now. See, I wish I had a razor blade because that would just make it easier. But the reason why we cut it is so that it has room to expand, okay? And I want to cut it now so that if I waited for the second rise and I cut it then, I always end up letting those gases go, and again, all that work that we did goes by the wayside. So once it's to this point, I just go ahead and grab parchment paper. Okay, and I'm going to set this on top of my parchment. Now what I love, okay, so I just grabbed it, put it on top of my parchment. What I love about parchment is that I can then transfer this directly from this pan right into the oven. So I don't have to touch it, I don't have to mess with it. It just makes it super, super simple. So I'm just going to go ahead and from here just lay on a little bit of olive oil. If you have a mister, you can just spray it with some water. I mean, even that will work, but this is just going to give it a nice golden top that we want. Okay, so I'm just going to do that. And this one's kind of messy, but I like to throw some flour on there because it gives it that little rustic touch, that look that I like. So that's completely aesthetic. But from here, I'm going to go ahead and cover this again with plastic wrap. Cover it with the towel, and I'm going to let this sit for 20 minutes. Once the 20 minutes are over, I'm going to have my oven preheated to 500 degrees Fahrenheit, and what I do is I transfer this to a preheated pizza stone. So I have a stone in my oven that's already nice and hot, and right when I transfer this to the pizza stone, that's what gives it the nice brown bottom and the thick top. Okay, so it's like bam, it just starts to work right away. It goes in for 500 degrees for 10 minutes, and after the 10 minutes I lower the temperature to 350 for an additional 25 minutes. That's it. So really most of the time is just spent rising, okay? But after the 20 minutes, I'll go ahead and put it in there and my loaf will be done.